Getting too much spam and want to be able to better protect your personal data? Then try Incogni and get a 60% discount on an annual subscription when you use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup. Click below to get started or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, man, the first half of the show is meant to be very different, but I woke up this morning to the news that many of you have no doubt already heard. The Bungie CEO has a really big and rapidly expanding classic cards collection. Okay, but before we get to that, we need to cover the actual news. This morning, Bungie uploaded a blog post titled The New Path for Bungie. In it, Bungie revealed its largest ever round of job cuts and restructuring, changes so profound that they are sure to transform Bungie forever. The top line number is that 220 people, or 17% of Bungie's current workforce, will be laid off immediately. This comes after Bungie had laid off around 100 people in October of last year, a move that multiple outlets, including Bloomberg and IGN, reported was a last-ditch effort for Bungie's leadership to maintain control of the company after Sony's acquisition imposed financial targets that Bungie were not on track to meet. 220 people is a massive number of people losing their livelihoods, but that is not the total number of people leaving Bungie. Separate from those 220 people, 155 Bungie employees will be moving to Sony Interactive Entertainment and will become Sony employees. The blog post was not specific about which exact roles would be moving over, but you have to imagine it's a mix of shared services and marketing and analytics and monetization, etc. 155 staff represents 12% of Bungie's workforce, and now those people work directly for Sony rather than for Bungie. But that's not all. In addition to those 375 people already mentioned, an additional 75 people who are working on a new IP will be spun out to create a new Sony-owned studio to continue delivering that title. That's described as being an action game set in a sci-fi fantasy universe. We don't know anything else about it at this point. So to recap, in October of last year, Bungie had approximately 1,400 staff. Now, less than a year later, they are down to 850 staff. That is a reduction of roughly 40%. Imagine, if you will, your place of business. Maybe it's big, maybe it's small. Now imagine 40% of the people that work there are gone in the space of 10 months. That is what is happening at Bungie right now. But why is this happening? Well, the short answer is gross mismanagement on the part of Bungie's leadership. And that is not speculation, by the way. That is confirmed by Bungie CEO and car enthusiast Pete Parsons himself when he uploaded this blog post announcing the changes. His admission came in this form, quote, "For over 5 years, it's been our goal to ship games in 3 enduring global franchises. To realize that ambition, we set up several incubation projects, each seeded with senior development leaders from our existing games. We eventually realized that this model stretched our talent too thin too quickly. It also forced our studio support structures to scale to a larger level than we could realistically support, given our 2 primary products in development, Destiny and Marathon. In 2023, our rapid expansion ran headlong into a broad economic slowdown, a sharp downturn in the games industry, our quality miss with Destiny 2 Lightfall, and the need to give both the Final Shape and Marathon the time needed to ensure both projects deliver at the quality our players expect and deserve. We were overly ambitious, our financial safety margins were subsequently exceeded, and we began to run in the red," end quote. Now, to be super clear about what all this means, Bungie's leadership thought that the revenue from Destiny and other outside investment sources would be enough to fund not only the ongoing development of Destiny, but also fund the development of Marathon, and also fund the development of another, presumably AAA action sci-fi franchise. Bungie's leadership then sold the company to Sony for $3.8 billion, promising that there would be no job cuts or restructuring following that acquisition. Less than 2 years later, they are now effecting massive job cuts and restructuring, and the future of Bungie has never been more uncertain. And it's always the fucking executives, man. The person writing the lore entries and, QAing the latest raid isn't the one who thought that a third AAA franchise would be a smart bet. That was Bungie's leadership. But now over 320 people are out of the job, and a further 230 people have to farewell co-workers as they're forced into new roles with a new company that they may or may not have wanted to work for in the first place. Parsons say the cuts affect every level of the company, including senior leadership, but so far there's one big name missing from the list of former employees: his. In his missive, Parsons does not offer his resignation, nor does he indicate that he would resign in future. The ultimate accountability for this disastrous outcome rests with him, but the impacts of it rest with everybody else. So far, he's escaped all forms of accountability. More than 300 people are out of the job, and he is doing just fine. How fine? Well, I'm glad you asked. According to reports, Pete Parsons has spent over $2.3 million on classic cars since Sony acquired Bungie 2 years ago. And this was just from one online auction site where his profile is public. God knows how much he's actually spent elsewhere. Many of these cars show up on a Flickr album titled Avance Parsons Garage Tour 2024, an album that clearly shows photos of Pete Parsons himself showing off his multi-million-dollar car collection, in the very same year that he is running his company into the ground and sacking workers. The fact that he did not fall on his sword in this announcement is honestly shameful, but let's be super clear. He is absolutely not alone when it comes to this sort of greedy excess and hubris, as almost every executive and CEO does the exact same thing that Parsons does. They're just smart enough not to keep a public record of their lavish purchases. The response to this recent announcement has been anger, shock, and disappointment. Bungie's current community manager, DMG, said this, quote, "Inexcusable, industry-leading talent being lost yet again, accountability falling upon the workers who have pushed the needle to deliver for our community time and time again," end quote. Former community manager Liana Rupert said this, quote, "Step down, Pete. You are a liar, a thief, and so many things we can't discuss publicly. Step down and without the giant Sony payout. This isn't on Sony, this is squarely on the failure of leadership, plain and simple," end quote. All of this creates big questions about what this means for the future of Bungie. In terms of their leadership, it's a clear sign that Sony are now firmly in control of Bungie, a point reported by Jeff Grubb himself when he said on Twitter, quote, "I'll put it as far as I know, which isn't everything by a long shot. In time, Bungie will lose its autonomy and will become like any other PlayStation worldwide studio under SIE and Herman Holst," end quote. As for what this means for Bungie's output, that's much less certain. We know Bungie is now a 2-game studio only. They're working on Marathon and Destiny. Marathon continues to be a huge question mark. The extraction shooter genre is popular, but it's also niche, and Bungie have not managed to put out a successful PvP game for over a decade now, as Destiny's PvP has always been awkward, deprioritized, and an afterthought, to the point where the competitive community completely abandoned the game about 3 or 4 years ago. What's there now feels like a very auxiliary add-on to Destiny rather than a core part of it, and so I do not have faith that Bungie would be able to knock it out of the park with a competitive experience on day one. I have faith they'll stick with it because at this point, Marathon is too big to fail. As for Destiny, man, I don't know. One thing I will talk about in my Final Shape review, some of which will need to be rewritten now, is the fact that Destiny's loot and progression systems have finally caught up to the core gunplay mechanics, which is to say that the entire game now feels phenomenal, to the point where you have to ask, where else can you go after this? Player counts after the Final Shape are back to where they were pre-Final Shape, plus or minus a little bit. This is one of the best expansions that Bungie has ever shipped, and the pie has not gotten any bigger. Without massive renovation or a sequel, I do not predict that Destiny will grow, especially now that there are significantly less people working on it than there were 8 months ago. I do predict some sort of Destiny 3 in the future, but that's a long way off, and Bungie need cash now. I worry how Bungie and Sony's executives plan to make up that revenue shortfall while Bungie work on whatever the next iteration of Destiny might be. So that's all we got for the Bungie stuff right now, but like I said, this is a very fresh story, so I'm sure there's going to be plenty more that we find out over the coming days. We'll no doubt check in again on this one next week. I wish I could tell you that that story was the only bad news this week, but there's plenty more. Just recently on this very show, I was shouting out indie publishing label Humble Games. You probably know them from where they started, Humble Bundle, the shopfront that would sell bundles of games for super cheap with big chunks of that money going to charity. That grew to the point where it was eventually acquired by Ziff Davis, the company that owns IGN. After that, Ziff Davis greenlit a publishing push within Humble, so they weren't just selling games, they were actually funding the development of them. Now, they never got a huge amount of press, but let me tell you, this was one of the best indie publishing labels working. This is the label that brought us bangers like Signalis and Stray Gods and Ghost Song, Moonscars, Temtem, Unpacking, and honestly so many more that there's just too many to list here. We speak regularly about Devolver and their output. I genuinely believe that Humble was on the same level in terms of their eye for quality. They really did know how to pick them. And I speak about them in the past tense because they are no more. Humble Bundle will continue to exist to sell games as it always has, but the publishing label has been wound down, with staff announcing on LinkedIn last week that they'd all been let go. 36 staff were immediately laid off, leaving absolutely no one behind to help usher in progress projects or even manage recently launched titles like Bow Path of the Teal Lotus or Coral Island. games that were supposed to get console ports after releasing on PC. Humble put out a statement on the matter saying, quote, "In these challenging economic times for indie game publishing, Humble Games has made the difficult but necessary decision to restructure our operations. This decision was not made lightly. It involved much deliberation and careful thought with the goal of ensuring the stability and support of our developers and ongoing projects. Additionally, the restructuring of operations at Humble Games will have no impact on operations at Humble Bundle," end quote. So that's their statement, but the former creative lead at Humble Games, Chris Radley, saw it rather differently. Now, he hadn't worked there since 2022, but he did say this, quote, "I want to make it abundantly clear, this is not a restructuring of operations, this is a total shutdown of Humble Games. Operations have been handed off to a third-party consultancy. No staff are left," end quote. Aftermath did speak to a number of former staff members, one of whom said this, quote, "Ziff Davis does not understand the world of game development and the principle that when you invest money, a game is not released in 6 months but takes time to be done. And we're starting to not like this when they understood its workings, so with their stock going down, they simply decided that they didn't want to be in that business anymore. The decision was not rational and will really hurt indie development in the long run, on top of their employees and the projects in development," end quote. I gotta say this, as disappointing as this is, I'm almost not surprised, because I have noticed a significant downturn in the level of interest in indie games. Even the really good ones are struggling to break through at this point. For example, 1000 X Resist is a game that launched in May to thunderous critical acclaim, a mighty 89 on OpenCritic, 97% overwhelmingly positive on Steam, and yet less than 850 Steam reviews, indicating that the title just didn't sell well. That is a very regular story in this current climate. I feel like this current downturn has disproportionately hit the indie scene, and I suspect the closure of Humble Games will not be the only indie label closure we see this year. Stories like this one and the Bungie layoffs are a stark reminder of why unions are so important. They're not perfect, obviously, but they are at least one counterweight to the greed and incompetence of executives, so it's encouraging to see that organized labor is making headway in the world of video games. One big example of that from last week was the formation of a union at Bethesda Game Studios, but there are 2 more big examples of that this week as well. The first is the SAG-AFTRA strike, which has now commenced targeting video game companies. After 1.5 years of negotiations, 98.32% of the SAG-AFTRA membership voted to strike against companies like Activision, Disney, EA, Insomniac, Take-Two, and Warner Bros. Games. The strike means no acting or voice acting, stunts, motion capture, auditions, promotional appearances, award shows, or podcasts for any games made by those companies. However, it does not affect projects that were in development before the 25th of August last year. That means, for example, GTA 6 will not be affected by this, a detail that is important since few things would have gotten gamers aware of this battle like a delay to GTA 6. At the core of the disagreement is workers' rights and protections in relation to AI, which poses a particular threat to voice actors whose labor can be either replaced or exploited by AI tools. SAG-AFTRA President Fran Drescher, aka The Nanny, had this to say, quote, "We're not going to consent to a contract that allows companies to abuse AI to the detriment of our members. Enough is enough. When these companies get serious about offering an agreement our members can live and work with, we will be here, ready to negotiate," end quote. It is important to remember that the video game companies attached to this are raking in billions of dollars in profits. CEO Andy Wilson himself took home $25 million in compensation just last year, and no one batted an eyelid. But when a voice actor earning just above living wage wants to guarantee that their own voice won't be stolen from them, executives would rather shut down operations than acquiesce to that. Best of luck to the union, may they get every one of their demands met and then some. The other big piece of labor news this week was that World of Warcraft developers at Blizzard are set to unionize, creating what will soon be the largest wall-to-wall union inside any Microsoft-owned entity. 500 staff have signed up to organize under the banner World of Warcraft Game Makers Guild, which is roughly twice the number of people who signed up at Bethesda Game Studios just last week. There's absolutely momentum building around this, and if increased unionization is a byproduct of the more than 20,000 games jobs lost in the last 18 months, then hopefully there'll be at least some protection the next time an industry downturn hits, or just, whenever a CEO feels the need to pump prime their quarterly results so they can keep expanding that classic car collection. A quick lightning round to finish off. Subnautica developers Unknown Worlds are being very cheeky with the way they're teasing Subnautica 2. Turns out they've been putting Subnautica 2 screenshots into Subnautica 1. They're discoverable time capsules that contain images confirmed to be from the upcoming sequel. Rockstar, if you want to start slipping GTA 6 screenshots into GTA 5, that'd be swell, thank you very much. Slight spoiler alert for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, not that anyone cares at this point, but spoiler warning if you do plan to one day play it. The game was centered on killing the Justice League, hence the title, but oh, what a surprise. It turns out the Justice League are alive and well and we only killed their clones. That's a story reveal long rumored, but now confirmed with the release of the most recent season. Hard to say which is more of a shock, the resurrection of the Justice League or the resurrection of Robert Downey Jr. as the face of the MCU. Yeesh. Speaking of movies, the next Bioshock movie is still on the way, but apparently the budget for it has shrunk considerably. Producer Lee Roy was speaking about it during a San Diego Comic-Con panel, and there he said, quote, "The new regime has lowered the budgets, so we're doing a much smaller version. It's going to be a more personal point of view as opposed to a grander, big project," end quote. Damn you, new regime. However, I still think you could do a cool, low-budget spin on Bioshock so long as you keep the CG to a minimum and shoot the whole thing inside an aquarium. Hey, remember when Overwatch was a 6v6 game, but it became 5v5 when Overwatch 2 launched, with Blizzard saying it was one of the most important justifications for the sequel? Well, Overwatch is probably going back to 6v6. That announcement came this week in a blog post from Blizzard explaining their reasons for the move to 5v5, which honestly sounded pretty fair. Stuff like queue times, better game flow, more focus on gunplay, etc. Bottom line though, people did not like this change and it became a bit of a lightning rod for the more generalized criticisms of Overwatch 2. Blizzard say they're now running a series of test events to see how the game feels when playing 6v6. It'd be super funny if they just reverted to the Overwatch 1 client and called it a day, but that would mean no more $60 skins, so I think that is very unlikely. A bombshell report from Bloomberg reveals just how bad the PDF file issue is in Roblox. And no, I am not talking about Adobe's proprietary file format. I'm talking about predators preying on kids. In 2022, Roblox reported nearly 3,000 incidents of child exploitation to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In 2023, it flagged more than 13,000 cases. Roblox staff speaking confidentially tell Bloomberg that watching out for child predators is a Sisyphean task. Roblox HQ hand-waved the report, but the bottom line is this: if you have kids, you gotta watch them very closely if they're playing Roblox, because 13,000 self-reports to just one US-based government agency in a single year is a pretty clear demonstration of how massive and widespread this problem has become. Alright, moving right along, some quick sales data to top you off. Armored Core 6 has sold through 3 million units, making it a certified hit for FromSoft, but certainly not a Souls-like hit. For example, Shadow of the Erd Tree, a DLC, sold through 5 million units in 3 days. Let's hope 3 million units is enough ROI to greenlight an Armored Core 7. Paradox profits are tanking harder than Twitter and Tesla combined. Paradox revenues are down 90% year on year, with the cancellation of the ambitious Sims-esque game Life by You being a huge factor. Speaking on the losses, CEO Frederick Wester said, quote, "It's clear that we have made the wrong calls in several projects, especially outside our core, and this must change," end quote. So look forward to wall-to-wall medieval military strategy games and town builders. I guess it doesn't get much more bread and butter than that for Paradox. And finally, you guys ever heard of a guy called David Soliani? If not, you might remember this video of him overwhelmed when acknowledged by his idol Shigeru Miyamoto during an E3 press conference when Mario Rabbids was revealed. Soliani was the game director for both the critically and commercially successful Mario Rabbids 1 and the critically successful but commercially unsuccessful Mario Rabbids 2. This week he announced he was leaving Ubisoft, and it wasn't a short stay, mind you. Quote, "After 25 years, 11 of which beautifully spent working with Nintendo on Mario Rabbids, along with the company of our incredible community of players, I've decided to leave Ubisoft to embark on a new adventure. I can't say more now. Thanks a lot for everything, truly," end quote. I bring this up purely because this is a very talented man who made some brilliant games, and I think we should all pay close attention to where he ends up next. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, the best extraction shooter is about to get even better. I'm talking, of course, about Hunt Showdown, the absolutely peerless shooter set in a zombie-infested rendition of the Wild West. Sort of, please don't get too caught up in the geography, you know what I mean. For the first time in 3 years, Hunt Showdown is getting a new map. It's called Mammon's Gulch, and it's set in dusty Colorado, featuring deep-cut mines, rabbit warren-like tunnels, and dizzyingly high elevation points. It looks genuinely fantastic, helped in no small part by the fact that this game will be moving to a new engine when this update drops. There'll also be a raft of other major and minor changes, so many that Crytek are actually calling this Hunt 1896, a clear statement that Hunt is about to enter a new phase, and I personally will be logging on to check this one out because it has been too long without Hunt in my life. For real, Hunt is genuinely incredible. If you haven't tried it yet, for the love of God, download it right now, or at the very least when Hunt 1896 drops on August 15th. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Date Everything is a newly announced game from Sassy Chap Games where the goal is to date everyday household objects, including couches. Man, the timing on this is genuinely insane. Nice to know that JD Vance will have the perfect comfort game to keep him busy when he gets dropped from that ticket. This one features an all-star voice lineup, seriously too many talented people to list here, and it just looks silly and cool and funny, and I'm into it. No date for this yet, but expect it sometime next year, I suppose. And finally, one delay announcement this week to finish on, and it does sting. Stalker 2 has been delayed yet again. It was due to release in September, but will now ship on November 20th, a very chunky delay indeed. But as always, perfectly understandable given the extraordinary circumstances this team has had to endure while trying to make this video game. The developers did throw us a bone though, saying, quote, Stalker 2 is shaping up to be everything we envisioned, with the launch nearly here and we are incredibly excited to share more with you. To give you a taste of what's coming, we're thrilled to announce the Stalker 2 developer deep dive video, which will be released on Xbox media channels on August 12th, end quote. I'll be sure to report back to you once that is live. So what came out last week? Well, biggest release of the week wasn't really a release at all. It was a mod for Fallout 4 titled Fallout London. This is arguably the most ambitious mod project assembled and released, promising an experience akin to an entire Fallout campaign set in an entirely new map with full voice acting and so much more. Just an incredible amount of stuff for a free mod made by a team of enthusiasts. The mod is so big that Nexus Mods refused to host it, with the CD Projekt Red owned Good Old Games stepping in to offer to host it for free, and you don't even need to have bought Fallout 4 from them to be able to use it. So all that's great, but is the mod actually good? Hell yeah, it is. We don't actually have any critic reviews at this point since people are still working through it, but the general chatter across social media is very positive, with people praising the scale of it, how detailed London is, how strong the writing is, and of course, how excellent the voice performances are. However, it wouldn't be a Fallout release without plenty of bugs, and yep, Fallout London's got them. Plenty of reports of generalized issues as well as hard crashes to desktop. The development team are aware of the issues and have put together an extensive thread suggesting solutions. Regardless, the fact that this team put something like this together at all is a monumental achievement, and given that we won't be getting a Bethesda-made Fallout game for like another 10 years if we're lucky, it's nice to get at least something. This one's out right now for free through GOG. Earth Defense Force 6 arrived for PlayStation and PC last week, but it got itself into a fair amount of trouble when it became known that to play online, you actually need to set up an Epic Games account, even if you had bought the game on Steam. As a result, the game was heavily review bombed since Steam users don't look too kindly on that Epic Games Store, and EDF's developers have now announced that they plan to remove that requirement, though they didn't offer a time frame for when that will go through. Right now, though, the game sits at a mixed 50% on Steam. That's score largely attributed to that Epic requirement. Critics are less bothered about that though, and as such, EDF 6 sits at a fair 74 on OpenCritic. PC Gamer were big fans, but actually scoring it at 82 and saying, quote, Earth Defense Force 6 is one of the most joyful shooters I've played in years, delivering mega-scale slapstick gunfights like nothing else while walking a tightrope fine line between genius and idiocy in its design, end quote. Got a Netflix account? Then you may want to check out this next one, A Ranger, which launched for PC, PS5, and mobile via the Netflix app last week. It's a top-down Zelda-like RPG where the world moves when you do. Beautiful art style from the person who did Braid back in the day. 95% very positive on Steam, though that's only 70 reviews, so you gotta take that with a grain of salt. Critics definitely enjoyed themselves, putting it at a 77 on OpenCritic. Our man Edmond actually played through it, and here's what he had to say, quote, A Ranger succeeds at being a really thoughtful and charming puzzle adventure game that is just the right length, about 5 hours or so, to give your brain a good massage and a mental reset without being too overbearing. There's a consistent stream of clever ideas throughout, and its calming art and personality is delightful to the point where you look forward to going back in. There's clearly a lot to love in this game. I loved playing it, and it's well worth spending time with. Don't forget, it is free with a Netflix subscription too, end quote. VR people, a new game has released. Get excited. This one is a MetaQuest 3 exclusive for the moment, but later in the year it will also come to PC. It's Thrasher, sadly not a follow-up to the classic Skate and Destroy. It is in fact a follow-up to Thumper, the rhythm game from the developer Drool. This one is still a rhythm game, but it's very different in its style, and it's apparently great. No OpenCritic page for this one, sadly, but all the reviews we found have it at like 8 or 9 out of 10. Press Start, for example, scored this one a 9, saying, quote, Much like Thumper, Thrasher does take a little sticking with before it eventually shows its hand, and for things to really click into place as you enter a sort of virtual reality trance state. When it does though, the vibes are undoubtedly immaculate, and you'll feel like you've slipped into a world tucked between the natural rhythms of time and space, bonded to a cosmic ribbon of unexplainable beauty and gifted the power to slay incomprehensible beings at the turn of your wrist, end quote. And finally, after 13 years in early access, yes, you heard that right, 13 years, 7 Days to Die has officially hit 1.0. When this game was first released, it was held up as one of the early access cautionary tales, like this is why early access is bad. It scored a 37% with critics back then, but 13 years of work tends to improve even the worst of things, and today 7 Days to Die proudly sits at 88% very positive on Steam, with nearly 290,000 reviews counted. The game does look pretty old at this point, but its strong art direction has given it an almost timeless appeal. Either way, it is great to see how far this one has come since that initial release. I do wonder what the development team plans to work on next, and whether or not that too will take 13 years of development. So what's coming out this week? Well, we're getting 2 Star Wars games this month. The first is Outlaws, due on the 30th. My preview for that went up earlier this week, by the way, link below the like button. The other one is this one, Star Wars Bounty Hunter, a remaster of the classic PS2 and GameCube era third-person shooter that saw you play as Jango Fett while doing, bounty hunting things. It was never an amazing game, but like a lot of things from back in that era, it was a nice intersection of genre and IP that just hit right. This remaster is being handled by Aspire Media, who just a few months back released those absolutely god-awful Star Wars Battlefield remasters. Let's hope this one is significantly better. We'll find out today when Star Wars Bounty Hunter launches for all platforms. The next game is one that my podcast buddy Lucy James has not been able to shut up about for weeks now. It's called Thank Goodness You're Here, and it's a... You know what? Lucy, why don't you tell him?
It's true. Any excuse I get to talk about this game, I will. Thank Goodness You're Here is a comedy slapformer set in a fictional town in northern England. You play as a salesman who has some time to kill, so he goes out into the town and helps the people who live there with their increasingly bizarre and absurd asks. It is possibly the funniest game I have ever played. I was laughing out loud multiple times, taking screenshots, texting people the ridiculous jokes that I was seeing on screen. It is made by British studio Coal Supper. It came out on Yorkshire Day, which is totally perfect, and is pretty much on everything. So please, if you enjoy absurd British comedy, I guarantee that you will love this. Okay, I'll stop talking about it now.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Moving right along. You guys remember Tomba? A game that looks like what you'd get if those troll dolls ever headlined a video game? Well, it's coming back for some reason. Limited Run Games are remastering this one, bundling it with quality of life improvements as well as museum archival material like packaging and manuals and art and interviews with the game's creator. This one arrives for all platforms by Xbox today. From the team that brought you Orwell comes Closer the Distance. It's a story-driven slice-of-life game about mending relationships with loved ones after a tragic event drives people apart. It's out tomorrow for all platforms bar the Switch. World of Goo 2 was a surprise reveal at last year's Game Awards, and this week it'll launch for Switch, Mac, and PC, though it is an Epic exclusive for PC. Nice job, Tim Sweeney. I'm sure this is the perfect title to grow your Epic Game Store market share. Nice. Natsumon 20th Century Summer Kid is a cozy game from a team of veteran developers who've been making this type of game for like 30 plus years. This one has a lot of Studio Ghibli energy in the art design and overall vibes. It looks quite lovely, and it's out on the 6th for PC and Switch. Pepper Grinder had a strong release on PC and Switch a few months back, and on the 6th it'll arrive for PlayStation and Xbox. That is a great pickup if you're into that sort of thing. If you like your 2D platformers old school and brutally difficult, then you may be interested in Volgar the Viking 2, launching on the 6th for all platforms. The first one was released over 10 years ago and was praised for its difficulty, precise controls, and strong pixel art. Think ghouls and ghosts, but for the modern era, and you're mostly there. And finally, I had totally forgotten that this existed, but Warhammer 40k Speed Freaks arrives in early access for PC on the 6th. It's basically like Twisted Metal, but 40k. I really don't know how else to describe it. It looks kind of janky, but it still looks pretty cool, actually. And the barrier to entry for this one is very low since it is free to play. I don't know, I don't expect the world from this, but hopefully it's a good time. I don't think I'll be going out of my way to play this one, so if you do pick it up, then please let me know in the comment section what you thought of it. Hey, put this on your radar. Recently, the PS1 style game has become nearly as prolific as the 16-bit inspired pixel art game. It seems every week there's a new game serving up a visual aesthetic that's as informed by self-imposed hardware limitations as it is artistic design. But even then, few games look quite as good as this one. This is .45 Parrabellum Bloodhount, and it's a new game from the studio that delivered the critically acclaimed VA11 Hall A, the cyberpunk-themed bartending adventure. This one is a lot more gritty and action-packed, a lo-fi PS1-inspired action game featuring fixed camera angles and an active turn-based gun battle system inspired in no small part by Parasite Eve. That combat system is a hell of a drawcard, to be honest, as precious few games over the years have been brave enough to incorporate it, and the brief snippets we've seen of it look very promising indeed. This one is oozing style, visual distinctiveness, has an innovative spin on combat, and you just know the writing is going to be on point given the team's previous work. There's no release date for this one yet, but if you'd like to keep tabs on it, then I've left a link to it over on my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and while it is the start of the month, we haven't yet heard about the PS Plus or Prime Gaming lineups yet, yet, so we'll cover those next week. We do have Epic, though, who right now are giving away the surprisingly excellent Metroidvania Fist, forged in Shadow Torch. Later this week, that'll be replaced by Lumberjack, an isometric casual puzzle game about being a bear and fucking up man-made structures and recycling the trash. It's got a positive environmental message, so the wanton destruction is justified. Outside of that, Game Pass got Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 that is now live on the service. We haven't got the full August lineup confirmed yet, but one of the game was revealed, and it's Mafia Definitive Edition, the top-to-bottom remake of the GTA-esque mafioso simulator from back when companies dared to make GTA-style games. Saints Row proved that that era is sadly totally over, so we'll have to settle for remakes like this one. Don't forget that Fallout London is basically as big as Fallout 4, and it's available free to download via Good Old Games. And the last shout is that Valorant's console beta has now started. Right now, it's only available in Brazil, Canada, Europe, Japan, and the US, so hopefully it lands in other territories soon. Interestingly, progression will be carried over to the full game when that launches, and there's no crossplay on PC, leveling the playing field since KBM provides a pretty big advantage in a game like this. Valorant is absolutely huge and will only pick up more steam with a console release, and it's free to play because that's how Riot like to roll. For our feel-good story for the week, it feels right to return to Fallout London. That team went through a lot to get that game out the door, including a last-minute major patch to Fallout 4, which Bethesda threw out just days before the mod was meant to ship, delaying the project by a few months so updates could be made. The team did not waste that extra time though. They continued building and refining and recruiting voice talent. Like, for example, did you know that Neil Newbon, the voice of Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3, called these developers up and asked to be involved in this project? Did you know that 2 of the most recent Doctor Who actors are part of this voice cast? But that's not the best part. The best part is that there's a section of the game set in the UK Parliament, and there's a robot who is playing the role of Speaker of the House, the person whose job it is to manage the absolute chaos that is Question Time in the UK, and to be fair, most Westminster parliamentary systems. So, which voice actor did the mod team recruit for this important role? Well, none other than the actual former Speaker of the British Parliament. His name is John Bercow, and he was the Speaker for 10 years from 2009 to 2019. He lent his distinctive voice and style to Fallout London, and just in case you're at all unfamiliar with Bercow's rather unique style, have a listen to the way he tries to bring some order to the proceedings.
Order! 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 Order, the Honourable Chair. Order! 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 Order!
Personally, if the speaker bot in Fallout sounded like that, I would be recruiting him as a companion and have him follow me around absolutely everywhere, yelling order every time I got into a fight. That would be sick. Alright, ladies and gents, that is the show for this week. You stuck around right to the end, so I hope you had a little bit of fun, and if you did, then could I kindly request a moment of your time, a quick pressing of the like button, and I will be forever in your debt. And if you want to be doubly generous, then hitting that subscribe button and notification bell would be a lovely cherry on top. We do this show each and every week, and the like ratio gives us energy, kind of like Superman with the sun, except, Henry Cavill is slightly more attractive than myself, though I am told that this shot of the new Superman putting on his boots looks kind of like me, and you know what? I'll take it. Thank you very much for stopping by, everyone. Have a great week, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, Incogni. Really excited to talk about a new sponsor on the channel, Incogni. Now, I've actually been using Incogni for about 6 months, and I've been extremely impressed with what it does and how easy it is to use it. So what is it? Well, our personal data is all over the internet, in places we don't even know exist. So we obviously know that the big tech companies all have our private data, but what you don't know is that one time you bought a random pair of socks from some online store, they actually on-sold your personal data to a data broker because you forgot to uncheck some box during the purchase process. Or you downloaded some application and the end user license agreement you ticked meant the company could share your data with whomever they please. This is how our data gets spread around. This is why we get so many spam emails and text messages. Worst case scenario, this is how our personal data can be used for fraudulent purposes. The task of trying to get all our data off the internet is too time consuming for any one person, but that's where Incogni comes in. You sign up, you enter your name and your email address, and after that, Incogni goes out on your behalf, and using an automated process, it finds your data and issues the necessary requests to get that data deleted. Incogni actually sends you monthly progress reports when it does this, and in just the past few weeks alone, my data has been removed from nearly 60 data brokers, none of which I even knew had my data. There are an additional 10 requests pending. If I had filed all of these requests myself, it would have taken me nearly 45 hours worth of filling out annoying application forms, but Incogni took care of all of that for me. I've absolutely noticed a significant reduction in the amount of spam emails and texts I've been getting, and it just feels nice to know that my data is more secure since no one wants their personal information being held by some company that you don't even know existed. It's super easy and super effective, and best of all, super affordable. You can use code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup to get 60% off an annual subscription. Take your personal data back and get a 60% discount while doing it by visiting incogni.com/skillup and using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks Incogni for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.